Hi everybody, I'm Gabriel Almeida. I'm an editor of the magazine Caesura, and I wanted to say first of all thank you to Thomas and Patrick for the invitation to talk today with Harriet. It was really nice. It really basically came about of we come in to see the show, and Caesura is a magazine of art and criticism, and we basically. That's great, thank you. We basically focus on trying to explore the potential, the aesthetic potential of our works. We want to kind of focus away from perhaps what other kind of experiences the artwork can have, social, etc., to kind of narrow down into kind of the aesthetic experience that an artwork can provide that is unique to a work of art. And so I remember we come in to see Harriet's work, and it sort of just impacted us, and we really wanted to do this. So thank you so much for that. And Harriet.
Thank you all for coming and looking at the work. I hope you spend some, if you haven't done so before, I hope you spend some time doing that. So Harriet Korman, I'm 74. And so I've been doing this a long time. I'm a native New Yorker. I went to Queens College, where I luckily had, I think, quite a good education. Even though it wasn't an art school, it was a liberal art school. The department was growing at the time, and the chairman brought in all of his friends as adjuncts, but they were, I'll mention a few at some point. But so I wound up, I think, having I wanted to go to art school, but that wasn't in the cards, and so I wound up having a good education. But that was that, and but painted all the time, and through various things, waitressing, working for other artists, then a little bit of teaching, but always working. And that brings you up to, and always really, after I left school, everything was abstract, and so always interested in these simple forms, simple abstract approach, here we are. So I won't say any more about that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
Do you have a question you want to start with, and then at some point everyone can talk as well.
I think the idea would be we will just talk a little bit with Harriet, and at some point we really would just be open for questions. So if anybody has something to ask, it would be interesting. But I just wanted to follow up on what you were saying, and we were talking the other day about how you became a painter. How did you encounter painting? How was it? I remember you mentioning that you had this more academic, formal training, this kind of realistic training, and then you went to college, and you find this experience of people telling you just go out and see what they're doing in the city, just kind of try something new. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Okay. Queens College at the time we had a very traditional approach, working from the figure, drawing from the figure, color studies, basic design, very traditional approach, which I think I learned a great deal from. It was great. I learned a great deal, but as I progressed, I was getting a little tired of it, and I kind of did a little bit forayed into abstraction a little bit. But that was also not so, I wasn't getting that involved because it still seemed like related to the figures or landscape in a certain way. So I didn't, it didn't feel as a part as I was sort of looking for. And then, well, I don't usually talk about my teacher, Richard Serra, but it seems like the moment. So simply because I want to do things on my own. So, but Richard was brought in as an adjunct. As he was just driving a truck, moving people's furniture around. So he was happy to have an adjunct class. But he really shook everybody up. And would tell us to go to the city and see this performance and this show, Yvonne Rainer dancing, Robert Ryman, Agnes Martin, Jasper Johns, Frank Stella. We had not been exposed to this. And so it was very much fun to do this. And then also, the ideas, all the ideas, the process. It was the moment of process art, which really interested me very much. Instead of thinking of a picture, what the picture should be like, it just seemed more interesting to get involved in this, moving the materials around, or building something or something like that. So that was really key for me, really interesting and important. And that was the main idea. And so that was very stimulating, and also going into the city and the museums and seeing what was happening at that moment. Aside from, he would say, what are these people telling you? You're painting like Cézanne, and, do you know what's happening, in the city? And so we all went. And now, not everybody liked him, but it affected me. And it really I just went in that direction. It just made perfect sense. Just say one more thing. And so another thing that also we had, Fairfield Porter was teaching a course at the time there, and that was also extremely interesting because he didn't teach painting. He taught, because he wrote as well as painted. And so his course was, he would just give us articles and books to read, things I'd never heard of before, never read before, philosophers. That was so interesting, and different articles in the art magazines. And so this was also really fantastic. So I just sort of lucked out to be at Queens College at this moment. And so that was how I moved into my current work.
Yeah, I did wanted to sort of just talk about this idea of process art. How because you always talk about the different kind of series of works, or the different kind of elements of your work as coming out of sort of an idea that kind of develops in certain way, of focusing on how the process of making a painting, what the elements of a painting are, what possibilities they propose to you, and how they change and they can transform. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about kind of your understanding of what focusing on process rather than perhaps on something else has given you.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because to me, now everybody has a different way of going about it. But to me, if you first of all, I like the materials. I really like the materials a lot. I get a lot out of it, But to me, if you focus on what you're doing, the process, instead of the picture, I think when you have a picture in mind, you have it in mind in a way. But if you just focus on the materials or your activity, something quite different can emerge. And I thought that was really interesting. And so when I started with that, it was, covering and removing and things like that. But then I've found that even though I moved away from that, and in a way, when I returned to oils, the work, you could almost say it was more conservative, but I still think that the idea of the process, what's happening when you're working, is really interesting. And again, it gets you a little bit away from one's idea of what a painting is. So, and so even, so that moves ahead through all these years. Maybe 10 years I was doing the acrylic scrape-off paintings and then switched to oil, and then, so 40 years. But I think the feeling of process continues all the way through, even though, again, when I switched to oils, it's a little more conservative. But let's say in this body of work, the process was very interesting and important to me. I don't, just very briefly, it was a little bit about, well, the drawings are very spontaneous, they're just very quick and kind of a mess, and then I found this form that I wanted to work with. But then the paintings, this is kind of a long story, but briefly, the paintings, in order for the paintings are totally different, and so in order for them to really work, there's a transition that occurs from the paintings to the drawings that is, I find, extremely interesting, because I didn't know, like, if you could, some of the drawings have a lot of modulation, a lot of mistakes, and this and that. And at first I tried to emulate that in the painting. It really didn't, it just didn't work at all. And so I realized, you know, that, well, the painting is very different, and I had to decide what I wanted to keep from the drawing, or how to synthesize it, or so it was. I found it extremely interesting. It's almost like painting the figure in a way, like the drawing becomes like the model, you know, and then I'm working on it, and I have to decide what I want to put in, what I don't want. I have to simplify. I have to decide what's important. Or maybe it's just a complete transition, but it was, I found it very interesting, and I'm still working on a couple of these. So.
I did have two questions out of that. One was, when I was thinking, we were talking earlier about the drawings and the paintings, especially in comparisons like these ones over here. And you were mentioning how much more like mixed the colors were.
Yeah.
Like in the drawings, how more like they overlap. They have like combinations that when you went to the painting, you felt that you needed to sort of clarify those. And what it felt to me by seeing the difference between the two is that the relationship of color changes. How color works on the drawings as how color works on the paintings are very different because of the shapes being more clear and more distinguished.
Yeah.
And so I wonder how you think, especially since it's something that everybody that comes and see your paintings thinks about, is like how you work the color. It doesn't have this, how do you call it? It doesn't have like an impressionistic aspect. It doesn't impact you and you're meant to see the combinations or something. It has a more subdued, detached feeling. But I do want to, I don't know, I want to ask you what you think of how you work on color.
A couple of things. In the drawings, just the nature of the drawing and the material, they're more modulated, there's more mushy stuff in them and whatever. And so, you know, I have to find a way that it's going to make sense in the painting. But let's see, I just, So, but the color is also, now the color in the paintings is not always quite the same as the color in the drawings, because in the drawings, the white of the paper affects the color quite a bit, whereas in the paintings, I don't keep them transparent in any way. I like to make sure I have a good amount of paint on there, and so the color will be different. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, in this painting here, the drawing is right behind Kim over there. Now that blue around the edge, because on the paper is lighter, but I decided to just use the exact blue, but here it will be much darker. So there's a change and a difference that I choose. Mm-hmm. I choose that. And there's another aspect of the color, which is that a number of years ago, in about 96, I had done a black and white series. I finished that, and then I went back to my usual palette. And all of a sudden, everything seemed very cloudy. You know, I always would mix white in my paint. Everything seemed kind of cloudy, and it didn't have the impact of the black and white. Had a lot of impact, and you know, I thought, I wonder if I can paint without white in my color, like watercolor. You know, you don't use white, but the paper is like the white because it's transparent. So I thought, I wonder if I can eliminate white and just paint with the color. So I tried that a little bit, and I found it very interesting. And in one regard, one thing was a few of those paintings were very dark, and I thought, why not? You know, all these Tibetan paintings, they're very dark. You know, why not? What does it? So, very dark. That interested me, but then I might go. You know, I don't decide I'm going to make a dark painting or whatever, but some of these. So that idea of eliminating white kept holding up. At first, I thought, this is a stupid idea. You know, what do you know? But it kept holding up, and it seemed to free up the drawing a little bit, because I did that one little tweak I got, and I worked on the beginning ones, and then all of a sudden the drawing, I kept that color idea, and then the drawing started to change from very geometric to then more organic, and then it back to geometric, and all kinds of things were happening in the painting. So so I've stuck with it, and so that's 96. What is it? 25 years or something, I think it just worked for me. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Harriet, I did want to come back maybe to the question of process, in the sense that I guess the other day we were talking about how it allowed you to sort of create new and different paintings every time, like not get stuck on something that seemed to be repetitive. That something that was unique about your works was its capacity to each of them be different. And on the other hand, I was like thinking when I was leaving the studio, whether there is a risk at some point that experimentation becomes just experimentations for experimentation's sake. Mm-hmm. How do you think about experimenting towards what? How do you think what the picture that experimentation is going to allow you to make? How does that come into...
Okay, well, yeah, you experiment, everybody experiments, and then it seems like, I think when I'm at this point, after painting a long time, you know, when you're younger, you experiment all the time and throw out many canvases and whatever. But recently, when I'm experimenting, it's more on paper, and it all of a sudden, like with this series, so the previous series was like these quadrant paintings with the cross. That was in here in 2018. And then when I felt finished with that, so I didn't know where I was going to go, but I drew for a while. And then this form, the concentric rectangles, kind of came up. And I thought, I like this form. I like this because it's so ordinary, and I thought I'd like to see, and it's so known, you know, and so I thought I'd really like to see. I had this, if I could do something with it. So there's a point where, see, after, you know, when you're doing this for a certain amount, for 40, 50 years, you know, you have a bit of a vocabulary that you're working with. So for your question is, when does the experimentation move into something else, if I'm getting that question right? So at a point, you make a choice, you know, so at a point, I say, this is what I want to work on, this. And also I feel it's my responsibility to do that, because I feel, well, I've come to this point after so many years. I know I'm doing these simple geometric paintings. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to abandon it. And so at a certain point, I have to finish it. I have to finish it. So, and good or bad, whether it's good or bad, whether, you know, I feel a responsibility a little bit to these ideas that I've been working with for so many years. So that's where, so when I finish these, I'm working on a few more. I have a few ideas I'm going to draw, mm-hmm. and then see which one might be the most interesting. And so, yeah.
I guess I would think about one more question before I open to the public. But one other thing that I wanted to talk with you about was, usually when like a younger person comes to see a painting, something like abstract painting, there is this kind of impression, perhaps kind of superficially, that it's very different than any other painting made in the past. That is, and it's really, my question is about how you see the relationship of form that you created, the focus on form, as relating with things that you've seen before, that you go and see on a museum, that you go, how do you learn from those things that people in the past have done, or not, or do they affect your work in any way or not?
Well, I'm very affected by, I see a lot of work, and very affected by the art history I took in school. I think when I talk about formalism, which I'm a formalist, I think it's the same whether it's for me or for Giotto. It's what you're going to do on the surface, on your flat surface. How you want to treat the space, how you want to treat the color, how you want to treat the shapes. For me, form is the surface. So for me, I really don't see in many ways, I don't see any difference. But, so for abstraction, for me, I look at all that work, the Renaissance, all the work, all the realistic work, everything, and for me it's the same, and all the abstract work. The form, for me, is pretty consistent. So for young people looking at abstraction, so for me it's not different. But you do need to know, I think, it's a slightly different vocabulary, maybe, for abstraction. So you do need to, I think, know some art history, and I mean, you can't say black or white or pin it down. I mean, lots of stuff, especially today. So much is happening. You want to see and think about everything. For me, I always like to make a relationship to other art that I've seen, and so I would never say, "Oh, this sprung from nothing." You know, although possibly it did, but I mean, if it's completely new, it's probably based on an idea which needs to be explored. The viewer needs to really explore that idea as well as the artist, and it could be something really fantastic. But for me, and let's say with my abstract work, I would say I hope it's new and fresh, and yet I'm very interested in the whole history of painting. So,
I guess I do want to open it up a little bit so that we can have questions from. Yes.
Hi.
I think what one of the questions, you had sometimes not wanted to mix colors, and you use color out of the tube, but so many different brands, and you know, are these paintings done that way too?
Oh well, you know, when I eliminated the white and I kept my compositions very, very simple. I wanted to see to get the most out of the color I could. It really wasn't necessary to mix a lot of color because I really wasn't. I mean, in a way, I use color in the worst way possible. I abuse color. You know, but I just use it to draw with, to separate areas. I mean, I can mix. You know, when I was an undergraduate, the school hired me to teach this color class. So I mean, I can mix color, but I can make much more beautiful colors. It didn't need. I just needed it very simple, and it wasn't necessary. So I just used it as it was. But let's say, as the work keeps changing and evolving, like for instance, this painting here, which was the last of this group that I finished, there were a few paintings it really wasn't working. I had to actually mix the color. So I'm not opposed to it, but it just, I think there are a bunch of these. That one back there has a lot of mixtures but at first it just really wasn't necessary. So I just.
Can I ask another?
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about like the curved edges on some of the paintings?
Yeah. Well, this was a lot of fun, you know. I have this idea and I'm working. Oh, this one wasn't from a drawing. Sometimes I don't work from a drawing. I had this idea and this one is maybe the only, oh no, the small ones also were not from drawings. But so I had this idea with the rectangles and I'm painting and I'm going, well, it doesn't really have to be straight, you know, so. It's a painting. It's not, you know, it doesn't have, so. And,
But I mean, it gives it a different quality that you don't measure it and make a straight line on everything. It has a kind of playfulness to it.
well, this is funny because at first I had the drawings and I tried to measure it all out. I tried to, you know, I took the measurements and it didn't work at all. It's just, I mean, it didn't. First of all, the proportions aren't quite the same as the drawings of the paintings. They're not quite the same. So I guess if I wanted it to work, they had to be like had to do all this mathematics or whatever. But I sort of simply measured it out. Did not work at all. And so I just realized I had to just do it freehand. And it worked much better. It came out much better. In fact, the looser it starts, the painting starts, the more accurate it actually becomes. So somehow it captures, because I'm not really interested in reproducing the drawing, but I pick out the drawings I really like. And I'm not really interested. There's something in the drawing that I like. I'm not sure what it is. You know, it would be different for every drawing. It's something in that thing, and so I try to capture that. I'm not really the dynamic in the drawing. What interested me in the drawing, that's what I would like to capture in the paintings. So.
Anyone?
Yeah.
Thomas?
I have a question. So, Gabriel already said, at what point does experimentation actually stop having any meaning and becomes experimentation for experimentation's sake, right? And then you said also another remark you made is that you are a formalist. Now, being here in the gallery, I actually experienced that people do not see these works, experience.
I'm sorry, Thomas, the last little bit, maybe take off your mask. I got everything, but you said something when people come in the gallery.
When people come to the gallery, they don't experience the work formally. You know, they carry, the paintings carry a charge, they carry a potential meaning, which doesn't have to do with the formal aspect, potential, maybe they're generated. They don't feel gratuitous, oh, I'm just doing something experimental. So I wanted to ask you, would you know, do you pursue a meaning in your work? Is there something you would say, oh, this is what meaning would be for me, or could you define something there?
So, yeah, I think a lot of people coming in would not see the form that interests me, the form, I see that, and they could respond to other things, which is great, and I love to hear about that. If I'm getting the question right, so at what moment, I see. Right, so the experimentation stops at a certain point, which I discussed. So the meaning, well, I guess the meaning would be, in a way, why everybody paints. Everyone would ask themselves why everybody paints. Well, there'd be many, many reasons. And so I think that when people look at work, they should have a conversation with the work, have a conversation with the painting. In other words, stay there, have a question, just look a while, go back and forth. And it could be a great experience or not a great experience. But in a sense, it's like getting to know someone, Is it a great experience or not a great experience? So so I would think, in a sense, a little bit for all art, and maybe I haven't seen the biennial yet, but I read a little bit about it, but for all art, in a way, you're getting to know someone, what they think about, how they spend their time, what their politics are, all kinds of things like that. So I think, in a way, if you really look at a lot of work and spend some time with it, you get a sense of who that person is, and that's why we read poetry. That's why we read books. That's why we look at paintings as it could be a really fantastic experience. And
I guess one question is, the way that you put it, it feels that when you experience a painting, and this is very similar to how I feel about when I see a painting, it's not really a closure, it's more like an open question. If the painting is really new and different, it's going to be something that is going to challenge you. And that something that you said earlier, when you when you do the drawings, it's not that you want to copy the drawing to the painting, but you see something on the drawing that may, wants to be a painting, that is asking to be a painting. And I wonder if you feel the same when you see other people's paintings or your own paintings. It's like sometimes they just tell you, like another painting, like another thing that you may want to. It just seems to open possibilities for keep making work.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good experience with a painting when you're looking at it, I'm not sure if this is really so or if this happens all the time, but a good experience is when you see a show or something, when you can almost in your mind imagine what the next thing the artist is going to do. When you say, when it gives you that feeling of I can see them going this way or that way. A sense of other ideas happening. I think that's a good place to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in terms of open or closed, I think people now, I think viewers, should see the painting as open, and to have a real dialogue with the painting, and if it's too closed, if it's not giving you some openings, things to think about or whatever, well, I don't know, maybe that's not so, because there are a lot of paintings like that I like a lot, but anyway, that's, yeah, no. Any other, yeah.
One of the things that I find so interesting about what you're talking about is in terms of the systematization, right? It's like, it's both leading and being led. Mm-hmm. And kind of following after the breadcrumbs that are dropped along the trail, and then also kind of experimenting to see where you are in a given moment. And I wonder, in that that if you look for a balance in that, if you look to kind of push it one way or the other, because I think oftentimes that idea of finding that balance leads to a place that feels more like stasis.
Like what?
Like stasis.
Okay.
And these feel very opposite that. It feels like they're kind of moving, and there's an activity in them that I respond to very, very deeply.
Oh, thank you. You know, if I get another idea, you know, just from this group, you know, it just, it's great. And so I hope I fully got your question. It's a little hard with the math, but I think, you know, if I, when I'm drawing or whatever, if something looks good to me or interesting, exciting, you know, that's great. And so, was that sort of your question? But
yeah, I think the thing that I was talking about is this idea of stasis.
Stasis,
where it often feels like you're trying to kind of find a balance where things settle somehow.
Oh, that's an interesting
And
point.
this seems to do the opposite, where it kind of keeps things in a place where there's the experiment somehow keeps reverberating.
Well, that's great, you know, but the stasis is a little bit, you know, yeah, it could be a problem, you know, so that's yeah, that's an interesting point where things are active and when they're not. I think I think it's interesting, but then there are some times and artists and places where, like for instance, Don Judd, I like Don Judd's work a lot actually, and he's really working with, you know, he wants it to be like that, really still, I think, you know, and I think that has a type of reverberation, and even though, you know, I think that it has, you know, that stillness, that artificialness that is in his work, that MoMA last year. I mean, some of those they're like monsters. They're like monoliths. They're, you know, and but that strong personality that stasis is somehow moves beyond. I find it quite interesting. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that you can, you know, say one is definitive in a way. Mm-hmm. But so
yeah.
Something that you said about getting to know the artworks really resonated with me because I'm a violinist, so sometimes it feels like when you play a piece over and over again, not just intellectually, but also kind of physically, like it just changes the way that you hear music or have to listen. And so I was wondering if there's a similar experience when you paint, like when you were painting all of these paintings, did you find that like over time you kind of started feeling different about how you saw things? Or if you have an experience like that, I don't know if it's exactly equivalent with music, but I just want to...
Yeah, that's because in these, since they're geometric and simple, and especially in the series before, now I have to paint them a couple of times because otherwise the color isn't strong enough. And so people would, but the funny thing is so let's say I know the painting, I'm going to paint it about 3 times. The thing is it's not boring at all. Because every time you do it, the color changes a bit, the line changes a bit, the texture of the paint changes a bit. Maybe I'm like just, you know, a meditator, you know, and I'm counting beans. I don't know. but to me, or I'm weaving a basket. But to me, it's very, it's constantly changing. Even though I'm like just repainting this painting, it's constantly changing. So that idea of playing the piece over and over is a nice analogy. I never thought of that. But,
Do you ever regret that maybe you went too far? You know, like maybe the second coat you should have.
oh, not really, because the thing is, though, because the color doesn't, one of my ideas was I really wanted a very strong color when I started this idea. So it really, in order for it to have that color, I really do have to paint it a few times. It doesn't really, because they're fairly thin, it doesn't really get the right color. So I do. But in terms of going too far, I mean, I know I have to do that, but going too far is an interesting thing, like it would happen in, let's say, in this painting and that drawing, where I was trying to decide exactly what I was going to put in the painting. Oh, this one I'm working on now. Oh, should I see if I can get that other line that's floating around there in the painting? And, you know, so it was a tricky question. It's one of those things, so should I do it or shouldn't I? You know, and yeah, in that one back there, I went too far a couple of times. I had to repaint it. Actually, I did. I tried to put more of the lines in, and it didn't work, and I had to. But most of the times in painting, you can go back. Not all the time, but a lot of the time you can go back. So that's one of the great things about painting is you sometimes can reverse something. So anyway, yes.
I keep looking at the browns, the different ways in which the color brown appears, and I want to know at which point in the process that happened. It happens in the drawings, it seems, and I'm thinking that it's not often that I associate the sense of humor or a mischievousness with the color brown, but that's what I experience here, that the different browns play a role, and something about that makes me smile because it interrupts something.
Well, that's good. Yeah, the browns are very interesting because there's so many subtle differences. And by the way, if you're interested in earth colors and browns, Vasari paint has probably about 30 earth tone browns, incredible browns, incredible. And from all over, from Italy, from France, just incredible. A little more expensive, but some of them I actually had to mix. They really weren't. I actually had to mix a couple, which is surprising because they have. I mean, I have like 15 of them in front of me, and I would think I would prefer to find the right one and not fuss with it. But the browns are quite fun and lovely, and I hear they just moved back to Chelsea. They left Vasari on, I think it's 27th Street West, and they left town at the pandemic. So over 2 years now, and I just got a thing. They just came back. I hope, if there are any more questions, but I hope everybody looks it gets into the work. But if there's any last question, I'd be happy to answer. But otherwise, right? And that's about
Yeah.
right. Or,
Okay. Thank you.